So we are joined with Dr. Eddie James Carthan, my father, the first Black mayor of Tchula, Mississippi, the first Black school board president in Holmes County, as well as supervisor, Beat 5. Thank you so much for joining us.
As the first Black president of a school board in the state of Mississippi.
Okay, well, thank you for correcting me. Look, I didn't know that. I knew it was the first Black president of Holmes County. I didn't know you was the first Black school board president, period.
Right. Yep.
Cool. So let me get a few things set up here, and we're going to dive right in. First, start off telling us about who is Eddie James Carthan.
Okay, that's going to take 2 days.
Give me the short version.
I was born in a farming community. The community was called Choctaw. And my father and grandfather were farmers. And I grew up on the farm, picking chitin, chopping chitin, feeding hogs, chickens, fixing fence, working in the garden, working in the field when I was real young. So my granddad, his name was Neely Randall. He was one of the recipients of what the country might know as 40 acres and a mule. During the Emancipation Proclamation that was orchestrated by President Lincoln. And after the war had ended, all of the slaves were farmers. And they formulated a program that would give each slave family at least 40 acres and a mule to make a living. And the skills they had was farming. However, President Lincoln was killed, and the president that succeeded him did not follow through on that plan in an effort for him to bring the country back together to please the Southerners. They did not get the 40 acres and a mule. Where they were able to go to the Farmers Administration, I believe it was called back then, and they were allowed to apply for a loan. And in that loan were they built them a house, a barn, and they purchased the land. And the amount of land varied from time to time. Some had 40 acres, 80 acres, 100 acres, 200 acres. But anyway, my granddad, along with others in that community, which was a plantation, and the government divided that plantation up into what they call projects, and each black family were able to get a project. And my grandfather was the first to pay for his farm, and I was, I guess, about 2, 3, maybe 5 years old. I remember when he paid the final note on that land, and that land is where your uncle David Lee lives now. But anyway, I grew up my granddaddy, Neely Randall, in the early 60s, probably 61, where the civil rights movement started in Mississippi by organizations like NAACP, SNCC, CORE, and there was others involved in organizing the civil rights movement. And I was, I guess, about 12, 13 years old. I would go to the meetings with my grandfather, and that's how I got started in the civil rights movement. They eventually started what is known as Freedom School. I attended the Freedom School, and there we were taught our civil rights, information about the Constitution. We had classes. We was taught how to canvass, how to get people to register to vote, and we would go out in the communities to canvass and to encourage Black people to register to vote. Mind you, this has been over 100 years since Blacks had the opportunity to vote. They voted back in 1860s, but the Ku Klux Klan and the White Citizen Council took over and took the rights away. They also showed us how to, when we go out to demonstrate or to integrate segregated places like restaurants and different stores that that Blacks were not allowed to go into. Back then, everything was separated. At the doctor's office, you had the Black waiting rooms and the white waiting rooms. Even in public buildings like the courthouse, they had a fountain for Black folks to drink water and a fountain for white folks to drink water. Everything was segregated. By me growing up on the farm, and which is a total community of Black people, I didn't get a chance to mingle or communicate with white people, because the only time I saw white folks was when I came to town, or they came through there selling something. And but anyway, I got started in the civil rights movement. We protested various businesses. I remember we had made a plan to integrate some places in Tchula, the movie theater, stores. I was assigned to the barbershop. I went into this barbershop, all white barbershop, to get a haircut. And he asked me, he said, "Boy, what you want?" I said, "I want a haircut." He said, "It costs $2. I said, "Give me $1.50 haircut."
You gonna get lynched.
I got $1.50 haircut. But we went all over Holmes County, all over the state of Mississippi, integrating places that we were not allowed to go into, and participating in marches, demonstrations all over the state. And the people that helped organize, local people like John Ball, Sam Block, uh, but and then we had local people who they were farmers. You know, when the organizers came into the state of Mississippi, they couldn't organize the school teachers or the plantation people who lived on the plantation or the factory workers. They had to go to the black farmers. They owned their own land, and uh, and they organized the black farmers who were the main group that allowed the children to participate in the movement. We got arrested a lot of times, put in jail for marching, for demonstrating. And I remember the first time Dr. King came to Mississippi, to Jackson, at the uh, legislature building, standing there in the lobby. And he was surrounded by black folk, and there were some mean white folks there that wanted to fight him. And I was a little boy watching and scared too, all at the same time. But every time a white hand would reach at Dr. King, there was a black hand grabbing it.
Mm.
And we, young people all over the state of Mississippi, came to Jackson while King was there and to participate in the Freedom March. And they put all of us in jail. There was so many of us, they ran out of room in the county jail, the city jail, and they started putting us in cow stalls right there where you have the Coliseum that uh, um, where cows and things.
At the fairground.
What's the uh,
At the fairground.
fairground? Yeah, yeah. And we was packed in there like sardines in a can. 3 days, 3 nights, no food, no water, until the farmers, the black farmers, our parents came and bonded us out. Um, so that's how I um, um, became involved in this civil rights movement. It was interesting. It was scary at times because we had to go on plantations and we had to go and whenever, and there were white people, students who came down and who participated in the movement. They were known as freedom riders. And uh, and a lot of time while we was out canvassing, they would be with us. And if you were seen with a white person, they knew then that you were a freedom rider and you were a part of the civil rights movement. I remember this white lady and I was canvassing out in Coxbury, and uh, we had to go walk from house to house and explain to the people and set a time and date to pick them up and take them to the courthouse to register. We had left one house, and this was kind of in the hills section of Holmes County. And here come this truck, and she ran into the woods to hide because they had seen her with me. That would have initiated a lot of trouble. But however, he saw us, and we were all riding in a station wagon, and so This white guy had an old blue Chevrolet Ford truck, and and the, and it was a bunch of us in the station wagon. So when we recognized this guy was threatening us, we all jumped in the station wagon to get out of that community. He followed us. He followed us, and we was running from him. Matter of fact, we left some people out there. We couldn't pick up everybody. They were on their own. So this guy, he was driving this truck and had the shotguns, holding it one hand and driving one hand. But that old truck he couldn't keep up with us. And so we came on back to Tchula. But those were some events that took place. We boycotted Lexington so many times, and my friend Daniel Davis and I, we would always be the first two to get arrested. And so when the sheriff came looking for us, we was in this building where we met, and sheriff came in with a warrant for Eddie Carthan and Slick Davis. He had his name wrong. It's supposed to be Daniel Davis, but he had him down there, Slick Davis. So he handcuffed me, and he looked around. Where's Slick Davis? Davis said, I'll be in today. So he carried both of us to jail, and probably 4 or 5 other people. Yeah.
So tell us about how did you end up running for mayor? I know Hollis Watkins tells this story about you being 14 years old and telling him, I'm going to be the first Black mayor of Tchula, Mississippi. Do you remember saying that?
Well, I knew I had to be and had planned to be involved in the movement because, having worked with those people at a very young age, it was all it was in the blood to fight for freedom. And I learned from Dr. Aaron Henry. Now I'm older, and I knew folks were being fired from they was caught trying to register and vote. And people's houses like, oh Lord, Hartman Turnbull, one of the greatest civil rights leaders. People don't talk much about him, but he and Fannie Lou Hamer were the first two Blacks in this country to speak at the National Democratic Convention that was held in Chicago. I think this was in 63 or 64, I don't remember. And that's where the Freedom Democratic movement was started. That's a book by itself. But anyway, I remember when the first group of people planned to register to vote. And I was at the meeting. We met at a church down in Marston. The church was packed, people all over the county. I guess about 200 people. And Reverend Russell and Rafford Hayes were some of the local leaders. And they took a vote that they was going to go to, all of them was going to go and register I don't know what day, could have been the next day or the day after, but they decided at that meeting that they was going to go and register to vote. And
Background noise. Your
there's a train coming through. My dog's out there barking. They love, they love to do that when the train coming through. I don't know if the train talking to them or they talking to the train. They try to out yell the train. But out of all those people that were there, only 14 showed up that day to register to vote. And I just about could, and all of them came from the Marston community. Hartman Turnbow, Norman Clark, Miss Carnegie, Miss Epps, Mr. Ozell Mitchell, Reverend Russell, the Howard brothers, Robert Lee, Dave Howard, Robert Lee Howard, just to name, I can't think of all of them, but it was 14. And their name was published in the newspaper.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so once their name was published in the newspaper, they were considered as troublemakers. The bank wouldn't loan them no money if there was farmers to farm the land. Stores and people would reject them. But Hartman Turnbow was very outspoken, just like Fannie Lou Hamer. They could have passed for twins. They were the most vocal people in the state of Mississippi dealing with the civil rights movement back then. Were not afraid. But anyway, by their names being published in the paper, those blacks were attacked, either by means of refusing them with the lending institutions. Some of them couldn't buy their feed and seeds for the crops and stuff. And Hartman Turnbow, who lived right down the road, about 2.5 miles from where I am right now. The sheriff, his deputies, and the can't think the names right now, but anyway, they went down to bomb his house. Hartman lived across a railroad track. And Hartman was a veteran and can handle a gun very well. He used to brag that he can take a .22 rifle and shoot birds in the air. But they came and threw Molly cocktail bombs in his house and shooting Mr. Turnbow shot back. And he shot 3 of them. And all of them went running. And they didn't go to the doctor in nowhere in Mississippi. They carried them up in Memphis to the doctor. And I think one of them died. Mr. Bob Gillespie, he was a constable. He was with them. He lives here in Tchula. And he was shot in the hand. And he wore a glove on that hand for a long time. And he died, about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe. His son, maybe longer than that, but his son still lives here in Tchula. And they put Mr. Turnbow in jail. And then the FBI's um, um, was informed what was happening, and those guys was running, so they uh, they jumped the track, and the tag on the sheriff car came off, and that's how they knew that the sheriff was with the group that was shooting at Mr. Turnbull's house. Uh, they came back. The sheriff and his deputies came back the next day and arrested Mr. Turnbull for bombing and shooting in his own house.
What?
Yep, they came back and arrested him. So, but once the FBI's got involved, and that tag was the key evidence of, and plus those men that were shot, that Mr. Turnbull shot, um, um, they had to let Mr. Turnbull go. Now get up to Aaron Henry was the state president of the NAACP. He was very outspoken concerning civil rights, and he was a pharmacist. And by me observing, I knew then that in order for me to participate in the civil rights movement, to be able to voice my opinion, I had to be self-employed. And once I graduated from college, I got into business. Um, um, I had my daddy to co-sign a loan. I bought a store, and it was the first 7-Eleven store in the state of Mississippi. There were no convenience stores. Every store all over this state at 6 o'clock, it was closed. We stayed open till 11 o'clock. It was called Carthan Convenience Store. And a group, people knew that I was very active in the movement, and several of them had asked me to run for mayor. I did, and won. But prior to that, I was already elected. I was elected in 1972 to the school board, and at that time, this was during the desegregation movement. All black schools and all white schools. The entire superintendent office was all white. And Mrs. Burns, Dr. Mallory, and I were the blacks on the school board. We got elected, and they elected me as president. And Dr. Mallory said we wanted me to be president because I talk too much. So if I'm president, I kept things going. Why this? Why this? Why this? But anyway, I knew that once the schools were integrated, whites left the public schools and they went to the private schools. But yet the entire county, most of the elected political positions were white. And so I asked the superintendent and requested the board to have the an audit done for the school system. He said he didn't have any, that wasn't in the budget. So Charles Bannerman, I contacted him and told him that I thought that the money for the public school was being spent in the private schools, and it was.
Wow.
But the only way it could be proven is that we had the books audited. So Charles Bannerman, one of the most brilliant businessmen that I've met. He was president of the Delta Foundation and Mace, two organizations out of Greenville. Now, Rap Brown's brother, Rap Brown is from Detroit. He had a brother that was created Delta Foundation and Mace. And when Rap Brown got in trouble, his brother had to leave and go to Detroit to help his brother out. That's when Charles Bannerman became president and director of that organization. Long story short, Charles Bannerman gave the school $20,000 for an audit. And we hired this black firm out of Memphis. I can't think of their name. It'll come to me in a minute. But 2 weeks after they were there, the central office burnt down.
Wow.
All the records and everything burnt. The whole central office burned. And then the next 2 weeks, the superintendent resigned.
Wow.
And we didn't have a superintendent. So Miss Burns and Dr. Mara and I, we appointed William Dean as superintendent until a special election could be held. And he was the first black superintendent in the state of Mississippi.
Oh, wow.
And they burnt the school, they burnt the office down, and so that was some of the stuff that I was involved in while I was president. In addition to renaming the schools, there were Tchula Tennis Center for Negroes, LAC, Lexington Tennis Center for Negroes, DAC, Durant Tennis Center for Negroes. They had it in, it's on the, it's outside of the building. And working with Arnett Lewis, a group called ROC, Rural Organizing Culture Center.
Yeah.
And we named those schools. They suggested it, and the board adopted it. They named those schools after those principals that were principals of those schools for so many years. Mr. Marshall at Tchula, J.J. McLean at Lexington, and Mr. William Sullivan in Durant.
Well, I never knew how those schools got their names. Okay, thank you for that lesson.
Yeah, they were both of them were long-time principals. And by the way, since we're talking about schools, Marston Vocational High School was one of the first black high schools with an indoor gym in the state of Mississippi. It was built back in the 40s. And it's interesting how it got built. Mr. Marshall, S.V. Marshall, was the principal. He graduated from Alcorn. He worked out not Ebenezer, but I can't think of this community. You probably see the little red schoolhouse once you come in on 17. Mm-hmm. Mr. Marshall was a vocational ag teacher out in that area. And there was a very, very wealthy white plantation owner, and he had a horse that got sick, and evidently it was a very important horse. And the veterinarians and all came, couldn't do nothing for this horse. Mr. Marshall happened to go by there and ask him, could he look at this horse? And Mr. Marshall went, opened the horse's mouth, and found out that he had a bad tooth. He pulled that tooth, and the horse recovered, got well. And the plantation owner was so happy about that, and he asked Mr. Marshall, what could he do for him? And Mr. Marshall said he wanted to build a school for blacks, for Negroes. And that's how Milestone got built.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So
Tell us about you being mayor.
I got elected in 1977, and everything was white. I say everything. The insurance company, we couldn't find the insurance. To be elected mayor, you had to be bonded. And we couldn't find anybody, none of the insurance companies would bond me. So the black farmers put up their land as a bond where I could take office. And up until then, black folks didn't go to city town hall meetings. The majority of them didn't even know when they met. And when I became mayor, they started coming to the meetings, and I knew that I had my work cut out for me. So I would had a couple of meetings with the governor to try to get some things done for Tchula, and I was able to go to Washington. Jimmy Carter was president. Back then, small towns like Tchula weren't getting federal dollars, only the big cities. And long story short, we were able to get state money and federal money into Tchula. When I took office, 80% of the houses in the black community had no inside plumbing. They had outside toilets. All the roads in the black community was dirt roads. Then on the other side, where the whites lived, they had streets, sewage system, tennis courts, fancy houses, and we began. First thing that was done is that we started building apartments here. We was taking advantage of all of the programs that was available. Tchula had its first clinic, 3 doctors here. The first daycare center. Very first time, police cars, fire trucks. Whoever was policemen or They use prior to me being mayor, they use their own vehicle.
Oh wow.
No, we got new police cars, new fire trucks, daycare centers, feeding programs for the elderly. The old, we start rehabbing the houses that was in Tchula and building apartments. So Tchula's growing rapidly,
Oh, wow.
and we're able to get a lot of money in Tchula. But the more we got done, the more white folks who were in the political position got angry, and they kept the newspapers, the radios, the televisions, all of them cast a negative report concerning Eddie Carthan. And
How old were you when you was elected? 28, 27?
no, I was 26.
Wow, 26 years old, elected
Mhm.
the first black mayor of Tchula. How did you
Mhm.
handle this pressure from the white power structure?
Well, uh, I wore a gun, or where they could see it. Oh boy. Um, uh, they were Shirley was very, very. She was the wind beneath my wings. Um, I remember you all was real small, and we got so many threats, and there were people who would volunteer to protect and guard our house at night.
And
You
it's
know,
crazy that you say that. Me watching the film Malcolm X remind me of some of the things we went through, as a little girl. Now, I don't know
yeah.
if is this in my memories or it came from a movie. Did we go to somewhere in Lexington and then we came out? Did they flip the Cadillac over, turn it upside down or something? Did that,
Cadillac.
yeah, did we ever go somewhere and they turned the car upside down?
Well, a whole lot I don't remember, but I had to be very, very careful because they used to set up roadblocks. I mean, the whole state was fighting. Uh, they had me branded as a smart nigger.
Wow.
That's what they say about you when you spoke your
Wow.
your 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 mind on issues. They let the the newspapers, the state troopers, I would constantly get stopped. Even the state legislature passed a law where I couldn't be the mayor as the having the voice as mayor. They passed a law where the board of aldermen could run the town. They did everything to trick and cripple me, but I never never stopped fighting. Never, you know, uh, kept doing stuff. Um, but yeah, that was interesting. Um, I'm trying to think of uh, an incident that took. Oh yeah, I don't care how nice and how humble you try to be, and how intelligent you try to be. Um, there were people, whites who had run things for years and they weren't accustomed to anybody handling business like I was doing. Blacks always went to white folks to get their ideas and get their permission. You know, I had a college degree. I knew how to run business. I had businesses, and I ran the town like it was a business and trying to get money to into here, and we got a lot of it. And um, I was about to mention an incident. Oh yeah, um, when I tried to communicate with the people that was in power locally in the county and in Tchula, I started visiting the white churches to let them know that I was their mayor. And I remember Sissy was a little girl, and Shirley, and I would go to the church. First, we went to the Methodist church, and there were a lot of white folks here in Tchula. You know, blacks are only about 65 or 7% population of Tchula. There were a lot of white people in Tchula. The community I'm in, all of this whole street, both sides was all white, all across the bridge. That whole all white. So when we went there, I guess Sissy thought she was at Zion City. She was crawling, playing with the little white girls and little white boys, but nobody spoke to us. Nobody said nothing, and we sat there until the church ended. We walked out. They just ignored us. The next Sunday, we went to the Presbyterian church. Same thing happened. You know, I was the mayor of the city. You know, extending myself as humbly as I know to visit their church. The folks at the Baptist church learned that I was visiting the white church, and they sent a committee to meet with me and told me that they had met and they heard that I was visiting the white churches and that they didn't want me there.
Wow.
And that I couldn't come. You know your mama, she gonna speak out. Well, we're coming.
I got it honestly.
She snapped. Who they think they are? But anyway, it was dangerous, and I wouldn't let Shirley go. I went by myself, and I went anyway. And the whole services last about 15 minutes. That's including the song, the prayer, the sermon, and when they was passing I'll never forget this. They was passing the collection plate around. This white guy, his name was Johnson. He owned a service station here. He had a thing that he was passing, and I was going to put money into the collection plate. He snatched it away.
Oh, wow.
Yep. But anyway, I came out and came on back home. But so Uh, um,
So you became mayor. When did the first case start? Where they tried to convict you of what, fraud and then murder, and so tell us about some of those cases.
okay. Uh, I should have been thinking. We stayed in court um, on various charges, um, just to maintain and to hold office, to be mayor. Um, um, I'm trying to think of the very first case. Um,
Was it
um,
with, that they accused you of misusing funds for the daycare center and
yeah, that was a charge, but that wasn't the first one. Uh, I think I went to court over, once we tried to establish a housing authority here in Tchula, and the whites, well, B.T. Taylor, Jim Andrews, and and Tony Manzur were very outspoken, and and we had Odell Hampton, Jesse Banks, David McLaren, and Roosevelt Granderson and John Arthur Hayes on the board. They were board of aldermen. They were the five, and so the motion came up for the town to establish its own housing authority, where and the motion passed, and I never forget this. Uh, Tony Manzur came up to the table and looked Odell in the face. I thought we told you not to vote for that. And and the next day, Odell resigned.
oh
He,
wow.
yeah, he resigned, and they had a special election to fill his position. General Van and Jason Gibson ran for the office, and Jason won. And so Jason, John Ecker, and Roosevelt Granderson teamed up to block everything. Everything we tried to do, we had guys come in to build factories here, a pressing plant, uh, a sewing factory, a jean factory, and they would call these folk, and after the meeting is over, complaining. But anyway, um, a lot of time I had to veto their actions, and that was one of the cases I had to constantly go to court on veto power.
Wow.
Just um, yeah, um, and there was a charge. I didn't know this white guy used to come by the office, sit down, and talk. I'm in and out, but I didn't know he was the FBI. Later found out he was the FBI, and um, I guess he was trying to find something. The whole the point was they could find something to convict me on to get. That's the only way they could get me out of office. And one of the things they said that uh, dealing with one of the housing projects that the money was misplaced.
Mhm.
We went to court over that, and 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 that case was thrown out. I'm trying to think the oh God, there were so many cases.
So tell
But
us about the case where they charge you with murder.
okay, uh, that case, Roosevelt Granderson, um, he was the he was bitter. I mean, bitter. He worked out at the school and doing everything, selling drugs, stealing the gas from the school, and he fought everything that I tried to do uh, at City Hall. People knew that knew this. But anyway, Roosevelt worked at a convenience store here in Tchula, and some guys came to rob the convenience store. At least I thought that they was robbing the convenience store. But once we went to court and I was charged with murder, uh, the guy came because Roosevelt owed him $30,000 for drugs. That's why he killed Roosevelt, and he testified to that in court uh, over drug money. But anyway, uh, lawyers came in from all over the country to represent me um, in that case, and um, um, and the guy, his name was Hester. I can't think of Hester's name, and he told the jury that 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 Roosevelt owed him some money, and he also, what else did he say in that thing? Um, oh, I don't remember all of it, but anyway, I was um, found not guilty, and the only reason that happened is that the Poverty Law Center and other groups sent in people way before the case took place to purge the voting roll books. Back then, they select who go on your jury.
Oh,
If they thought you were somebody that gonna speak up, you didn't serve on no jury. Uh, but for the first time, a jury was selected that was fair and impartial.
wow.
And after going through all the evidence, I was uh, and the prosecutor, um, you know, all of them was working together. Um, the
They
the
were all
judge,
related, right?
uh,
It was related, right?
yeah, uh, um, Jim Andrews. Oh yeah, that case took place before the murder case. After one,
Wasn't you in jail and they would have to bring you from jail to trial?
yeah. Uh, I wasn't in jail on the murder case. I was in jail for simple assault on a police officer. That's when, since uh, Van lost, who would have been that third alderman in supporting the programs that we was presenting. They elected Jason Gibson, so Jason started voting with John Ecker Hayes, who was white, and Roosevelt Granderson. But anyway,
They
I
had
had
a lot of.
I had a black chief of police,
Right, yeah.
and Jim Andrews he was white. He used to be the chief of police. So I think Roosevelt and Jonathan Hayes wanted Jim Andrews back in office, and he just went and put on a gun and came down to City Hall, and the policemen that I had down there, this was at night, told them that he was the chief, and that told them to go home.
Wow.
And they came and told me what had happened. So that's when Reverend Whitaker, John C. Winston, Johnny Dale, Robert Matthews, Samuel Callahan, Jake Johnson, all were deputized. We were going down to reclaim City Hall. Prior to us going, we had sent people down there. We knew it was a setup. And there were about 2-3 carloads of white folks parked at the end of the streets on each corner. And long story short, I went down, and those guys was with me. And I also had guys outside watching those cars, just in case they're gonna do something. And so I confronted Jim. I asked him why was he there. He said he was told by the alderman that to take his job back. I said, ain't nobody met. Well, John Ecker told me, I said, he can't do that. We have to have a meeting. I said, why don't you go home and come to the board meeting, and we'll get this straightened out, because you're not a policeman, you're not bonded, you hadn't been hired, you're not on city payroll. Go home. By that time, he pulled his gun, and I pulled mine, and we all got to tussling. And he got hit over the head. And when he got hit, the gun went off in the ceiling. And everybody thought we had shot Jim.
Wow.
But you know, in those cars that was parked, all the white folks in, you could hear they still got rubber on the streets right now. Well, they was getting out of town. All them guys left. I don't know who all they had out there, but they had 2 loads of white guys standing there. But when they heard that gunshot, and they were scratching off, getting out of town. And I put Jim Andrews in my car, carried him to the hospital, and they bandaged him up. And with nobody in there but me and him. And I brought him back home. And that's how I got charged with simple assault on a police officer.
And he wasn't even a police officer.
No, he wasn't even a police officer. And when we got ready to go to court, they couldn't use Jim, but they had charged me with simple assault. And they got this black guy who was a night watchman, James, what was his name? Ryan. got him to say that I assaulted him. And
He wasn't even present that day.
no, he wasn't even there. So, but they had to be a police officer. And that's when my lawyer sold me out. He didn't instruct the jury that I was the mayor and that these guys that was with me were police officers in uniform, and they were. And but anyway, I got convicted on that charge.
And so, how much time did you serve on that charge?
7 months in Parchment.
And so I remember you telling me when you was in Parchment that you fasted the whole time you was there.
Yeah, I didn't eat nothing. I guess the governor kept track because it was a
national case,
big political thing, newsworthy, and he finally he dismissed the charge, and I was let out. In the meantime, I had another charge. All this stuff coming back to me now. Were the charge was a federal charge where some men in Jackson sold daycare equipment to our daycare center, and they admitted in court they went to a bank to get a loan for this equipment and signed my name as a co-signer or something for the loan. But anyway, I was charged with what they call it, abusing, misusing federal funds or something like that. But the whole state was after me, and although the guys told them in court that he signed my name to those papers, I had nothing to do with that. But anyway, I was given another 3 years in the federal pen in Montgomery, Alabama.
So I remember you telling me you spent 30 days in the county jail, 7 months at Parchment. And how much time did you do in Maxwell Federal Prison?
8 months.
And you said when you was in Maxwell, the guys from the Watergate was there also.
Yeah, Watergate, Nixon guys, Ehrlichman, Colson. Matter of fact, some of them was just leaving as I got there, and some was still there.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And this is my case had at this time gotten national attention, international attention. Mm-hmm. And Ramsey Clark, who was the Attorney General for President Kennedy, took on the case. And when he took it on, that's when I was let out of the federal pen on time served. I was originally sentenced to 3 years, but I only served 8 months and came home. I'm tired.
This has been so good. We really gonna have to do a part 2.
Okay.
Really, really been good. So leave us with some final thoughts about your experience.
Back then, we had to struggle for whatever rights, measure of freedom that we got. Mm-hmm. And you had to fight for it. And freedom is that, especially with minorities, Black folks. And the only way that we can remain free people is that we use the tools that we have and that is to vote. We must vote. And voting has opened the doors um, for black people, and voting has determined, it's very important. It determines uh, what kind of job you have, where you go to school, how much money you get, what kind of medicine, medical care you get. We must continue to vote, and I would say that until, um, um, and not only by voting, we must educate our children, and that's how we can maintain and 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 live as a free people. Because even to this day, uh, there are those out there who are trying to turn the clock back, and and we can't let that happen. And we must vote. You know, we've come a long ways, and our white counterparts, they've been where they are all their life. We who are minorities, whether we are Hispanics or blacks or women, we are going up,
Mm.
constantly going up. So we have uh, should be encouraged and not lose faith, and constantly pray, and realize that we must stand on God's promises and on His word. He is real, and I stand on His word. I stand on His promises. Um, um, and I've had, and I didn't get a chance to talk about that. Uh, my experience with His angels
Mm.
when I was the government attempted to assassinate me, and God sent His angels, and I'm here. But
So
I'll get into that next
we'll
time.
pick up next time with you telling that story. So that'll start off us off with part two.
Okay, all right, that'll work.
Thank you so much for, tuning in, and thank you for sharing your journey with us. We really, really
Oh,
appreciate it. We have so many different comments. People are enjoying this. We have received a lot of feedback, and people are looking for the next, part two.
yeah, okay. Uh, Stay tuned. I want to tell them how I broke out of prison and broke back in prison.
Y'all have to hear his stories.
All
Thank you
right,
so
dear.
much, Dad. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you
All
all for listening.
all right. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Oh my goodness, you guys. I was doing good until the end part. Reading your comments made me um, feel a certain type of way, and so I just, I hear a lot of these stories, and every time I learn something different. And I tell people all the time that the work that I do, the things that I'm doing, it's in my blood. I was attached to my daddy. When he got out of jail, I wanted to go everywhere with my dad. And so I remember going to different meetings with him. I remember when uh, Mike Espy was a congressman. I remember going to some meeting and shaking his hand. I remember when he was Secretary of Agriculture. I had won a trip to Washington, D.C. Rock had a poster contest, and I ended up winning second place in the category, and I won a 2-week trip to Washington, D.C. And I was able to meet Mike Espy in his office when we went to DC. And so I just, like I said, learned so much from my dad and his story and what he has done. I have watched him serve people my whole life. This man loved people. And so, like I say, it's just in my DNA. And I really, really appreciate you all for tuning in. Make sure you all stay tuned for part 2. Think of some questions that you may want to ask Mr. Carthan, Dr. Carthan. When I say this man is full of knowledge, and I am just so proud to be his daughter. And you're right, it is in my blood, Selena, and I appreciate you for tuning in. And, this is like a history lesson for all of us, especially people in Holmes County. We have so much history there that we don't talk about, the history. And so that's what I want to do, create a platform that we can learn things like this from people that's walking around that we just take advantage of. We, don't know the resources that we have at our fingertips. So, Faulkner, I appreciate you for tuning in. I want to get you as one of my guests as well. You have a lot to offer. Representative Faulkner, he's also a DJ and wears many other hats. And so I can't wait to have you as a guest. I really enjoyed your show Friday night. Good stuff. So thank you all so much for tuning in. I really, really appreciate you all. And this is just the first of the fabulous masterclass with Dr. J. Thank you all. See you next time. And I'm going to figure out why his video wasn't showing. I could see his video, so I'm going to try to work that kink out. Thank you all. Bye-bye.